Welcome to the Anshei Sphard-Beth El Emeth congregation. Welcome here to Memphis, Tennessee, in our discussion of Miriam the Prophetess, Parashat Behaalotecha, Miriam Hanaviyah, Miriam the Prophetess. A very strange story appears in the Sefer Bamidbar, in Parashat Behaalotecha, the story of Miriam the slanderer, Miriam the malshina, Miriam the gossiper, Miriam who speaks against Moshe Rabbeinu, and something about his marital life. What is going on? What is this story all about? And why is it the conclusion of our parsha? First, we need to go back and look at the broader context. What is this story of Miriam and her slander and her gossip, her lashon hara? What is this doing in the end of our parsha? The Sifrei, the great midrash on Bamidbar, says that it has to do with the story of the prophesying people. Moshe had complained, he said, I can't handle all these people. And Hashem says, fine, I'll appoint 70 elders. And then somehow there were two others, additional prophets, Eldad and Medad, who became prophets on their own. And Tzipporah, the wife of Moshe, having heard that there are new prophets, she said, woe is unto them and their wives. And from this, Miriam understood that Tzipporah was no longer living in a marital way with her husband, with Moshe. And it was at that point that Miriam began to speak with Aaron and say, why is Moshe not with his wife? We're prophets, we were with our wives, our husbands. And that is the connection, the previous story with this story, according to the Sifrei. The Tzur Hamor, a wonderful Rabbi Avraham Sibag, 500 years ago, lived at the time of this expulsion of Spain, a tragic story where he was expelled from both Spain and then Portugal, lost his writings, then rewrote them. The Tzur Hamor says it's very simple. This parsha is about complaining. Parsha begins in a very idyllic sense, that everything is being set up, everything is wonderful, the camp of Israel is all set. We're going to the place that God has promised. Moshe says, Vayibin Aaron vayom Moshe, Kum Hashem v'afutzu oivecha. Moshe says, let all the enemies disperse. We're ready to go to the land of Israel. And then everything deteriorates. The asafsuf, the mixed multitudes, the mitonanim, the mitavim. There are people who complain. There are people who desire meat. There are people who complain about the man. Says the Tzur Hamor, first they complain about the man, then Miriam complains against Moshe. It's all about complaints. And next week we'll have more complaints against the land of Israel, complaints again later in the following week. Korach complains against Moshe once again, and Aharon. So it's all a connection of complaints. But let's get back to that initial question. How could Miriam the prophetess have spoken lashon hara? Really? That's our legacy of Miriam the prophetess, that she spoke lashon hara? There's actually a mitzvah in the Torah in Parshat Ki Tetzei to remember that which Miriam did. Zachor et asher asher Hashem Elokecha Miriam baderech b'tzeitchem Mitzrayim. Remember what God did to Miriam when we went out of Egypt. That we should remember the leprosy which she received as a punishment for her gossip. So Miriam is harnessed with this legacy, that this is what she did. She gossiped against Moshe, our great teacher. This is Miriam the prophetess, the one who is known in the story of the splitting of the seas, Miriam Hanaviyah. She is known as the prophetess. When she was punished with the leprosy, no one could travel ad hayasef Miriam. Until Miriam is better, no one travels. That's how righteous she is. And she speaks lashon hara? How could it be? I'd like to suggest, so what we have here is not Miriam, the private citizen, the sister of Moshe, having a chatty talk with her brother, criticizing Moshe. Not at all. Miriam here makes an error, yes, but it's in her role as prophetess. She makes the error within her role as prophetess. What do I mean? What is Miriam's role? What do you mean that she's a prophetess? What does that mean? Look in the book of Micha, one of the minor prophets, the smaller prophets, the Trei Asar. There in Perek Vav Pasuk Dalet, chapter 6, verse 4, it says, I've taken you out of Egypt. From the house of bondage I've redeemed you. Va'ashlach lefanecha. I sent to you Ed Moshe, Aaron, and Miriam. I sent you Moshe, Aaron, and Miriam. Micha, the prophet, seems to be saying that when we went out of Egypt, we had not one leader, and not two, but three leaders. Moshe, Aaron, and Miriam. The classic understanding of the Targum Yonatan, the Aramaic translation, Tlat Nevi'im. I sent you three prophets. Moshe, la'alfa mesirat dinin. Moshe, to teach the transmission of laws. Aaron, l'chapara alama. Aaron, to atone for the sins. Miriam, la'oral and nashaya. Miriam was there to teach the women. She had her role as a teacher of the women. This is one view of the tripartite of leadership, Moshe, Aaron, and Miriam. However, one can readily suggest another division of labor between Moshe, Aaron, and Miriam. It's a very strange division. If we look throughout Jewish history later on in the history of Tanakh, we know that the kings had prophets. For instance, David was blessed with three prophets, Shmuel, Natan, and Gad the prophet, Gimel Dalet. Yeravam, the king of the northern tribes of Israel, had Ha'achiyah HaShiloni, who tried to guide him. Shaul, the very first king, had Shmuel, the great prophet, who tried to guide him as best he could. Yoshiyahu, the great king, had Jeremiah and Huldah as well. Chizkiah HaMelech before him had Yeshayahu HaNavi, the great prophet Isaiah. Every good king had a prophet to go along with them. And of course, in addition to a prophet, you have a Kohen. David took Eviatar with him. Wherever he went, he had the Kohen to ask from the Urim v'Tumim, to ask from the breastplate, to ask questions of God. Every Kohen is accompanied by a king and by a prophet. The king is guided by the Kohen, who has the strict rituals, and who has the answer of God. And he's guided by the vision of the great imaginative Navi as well, the great prophets. Now the problem is, and the reason Miriam had a very strange and difficult job, is because Moshe played at least two of the three roles. Moshe is surely the king, Vahi B'Shur Melech. There was in Jeshurun a king. Moshe was a king of sorts, certainly the leader of Israel. A Kohen, well, he did inaugurate the service and the Mishkan and the building of the Mishkan. He played a major role in inaugurating the Levites and the priests. He was, in fact, a Kohen, a quasi-Kohen at first, at least initially. And a Navi, a prophet. He was the Adon HaNevi'im. He was the master of all prophets. But still, every leader, I'd like to argue, every leader must have a Navi, a prophet, to go with him. And the role of the prophet is to guide, in the case of Natan, to cajole, to urge, to play games and mind games with the leaders so that to make sure that they go in the right way, in the right path. That's the role of the Navi. Now, Miriam had a terrible job. It was a very boring job. It reminds me of the old Maytag repairman from years ago, the idea that she's supposed to guide and cajole and direct the leader. But Moshe, thank God, Moshe does not need any particular guidance. He gets his guidance directly from God. So, what's a prophetess to do when there's not much to prophesy about? But she was always looking. She was always looking. Perhaps there was something that she needed to do in her very important role as prophetess, to guide her brother. And here she saw an opportunity. Maybe it was a time of complaining. As one of my teachers once said, Cham bamidbar, it's very, very hot in the desert. It's a good time for complaining. And in this parsha, there's plenty of complaining. And she decides she's going to complain about something too, but not just complain, but she's actually going to direct her admonishment against the leader of Israel, as is her role, if need be, She's going to speak to Moshe Rabbeinu himself.